Hello and welcome to the Destiny 2 Lore Corner. Today we're talking about Season of Arrivals lore that foreshadows and potentially teases some of the choices Guardians may face in Beyond Light. These lore entries are found attached to the class armor sets found within the Solstice of Heroes event from 2020. They explain some of the ideas behind Ulan-Tan Symmetry theory and how the light and dark may not be a simple battle of good versus evil. With the end of the Shadowkeep campaign, we learn that the darkness, at least currently, is not trying to be evil or corrupted. I hope not, because I kind of like it. It claims to be a force for Guardians that could be beneficial or even necessary. Some of these ideas line up with the Symmetry theory born from Ulan-Tan, and further explored by Golden Age philosophers. The excerpts from what is called Ulan-Tan Heretic Saint comes from the Bond, Mark, and Cloak, and are as follows. Before the invention of the doctrine of symmetry, the prevailing framework for talking about the darkness was a moral one. Dark Age scholars directly mapped the paracausal forces to our pre-existing moral codes. That is to say, they thought that light was good and darkness was evil. For them, the connection was innate. This was a natural assumption, given how the darkness had raised the known worlds and how the Traveler had saved humanity from destruction. However, once the dust from the collapse settled, it became possible for City Age scholars to broaden their historical gazes. For the first time, they studied the darkness from a holistic perspective rather than a moral one. Most of these proto-symmetrists hedged their theses by stating, as Moringham put it in Darkness Enlightened, "Though it may be true that the darkness is a necessary evil, we may countenance its existence by acknowledging that it gives way at all times to the force of good. For wherever the light shines, the darkness recedes before it." It was in this intellectual space that Ulan-Tan first proposed the doctrine of symmetry. His hypothesis discarded the Dark Age premise that the darkness and light were moral in nature. Instead, he postulated that our moral understanding of light and darkness were subjective experiences of absolute forces. If one accepts that the concepts of light, darkness, and good, evil, are not perfectly aligned, then there must necessarily exist liminal spaces where light could be evil and darkness could be good. If true, it would be the ultimate triumph of moral relativism. It was this, yet unspoken, tangent of symmetry that the Vanguard found to be so threatening. The knock-on effects of Ulan-Tan symmetry theory were wide-reaching. They likely extended much further than Ulan-Tan himself ever intended. The idea of light and darkness as amoral, interdependent forces led to some extremely inconvenient questions. Chief among those were the following. If the light and darkness were interdependent, how could one ever defeat the darkness? As Ulan-Tan himself said, "I wish the light could win, as you put it, but we must accept that it's just not that simple." This theory became a thorny subject for the Guardians, who had spent centuries asserting their combat capabilities. Inherent in their militarism was the idea that victory, or at least self-defense, was possible. However, if their use of the light simply prompted the spontaneous generation of darkness somewhere else in the universe, then their military efforts were inherently futile. They were simply propagating an eternal stalemate at the expense of their own pain and suffering. In short, Ulan-Tan's biggest sin was telling a ruling warrior class that their war was unwinnable. While Ulan-Tan was certainly unpopular within the ranks of the Guardians, he became persona non grata with the publication of a pamphlet entitled Finding Light in the Darkness. Though it was anonymously authored, the ideas within were widely credited to Ulan-Tan, and he bore the consequences of its publication. The most provocative ideas within the pamphlet were as follows. Lights cannot exist without darkness. They are a bonded pair. They beget each other in eternal symmetry. They are as one. If we claim knowledge from Sister Light, then we must also claim knowledge from Brother Dark. The Traveler shares only half of life. Darkness provides the rest. We must know the dark to know ourselves. We must balance or perish. The idea of embracing the darkness, even to learn from it, was the final provocation, one that the Vanguard could not let stand. So while the true provenance of the document remains unknown, punishment was meted out against Ulan-Tan for having let the cat out of the bag. Though authorities throughout the system attempted to discredit Ulan-Tan, essentially forcing him into Hermitage for the latter half of his life, it speaks to the persuasiveness of his ideas that Symmetry is still a widely studied philosophy. It remains as controversial, some would say heretical, today as it was during its inception. Within these entries you can see not only the notion that light and dark is not to be assumed as a battle of good versus evil, but also that the militarist behaviors of the Guardians may not be the most effective method anymore. Furthermore, the most intriguing possibility that is hinted upon within these entries is that the Vanguard strongly disagrees with, if not is outright afraid of, which I think, the possibility that the Dark may be an effective tool to wield, and the Vanguard might be afraid of that. They may not be willing to accept that. So going into Beyond Light, we now know Guardians will be wielding the darkness with Stasis. The big question is, for me anyways, will the Vanguard know, and if so, what will they do in response? Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world as I jump into a new era of my YouTube channel career. Stay safe, and eyes up, Guardian.